They said Thalos K was uninhabitable for more than an hour without specialized gear. They were wrong. Lieutenant Varela had been there for 72 hours, most of them miserable, and the only gear she had left was sarcasm. Her armor was cracked along the thigh plate, the comms unit had melted into a hissing lump on her shoulder, and her plasma rifle was now a blunt metal stick, good for poking insects or herself if she got too bored. She lay half-buried beneath the wreckage of a transport skiff, flames crackling nearby, the sky above a smudged smear of ash and lightning. And yet the worst part was her ears. Her long shawl ears were singed at the tips. Singed! No battle scars, no heroic standoff, just stupidly burned ears because her helmet had rolled away mid-crash like it had personal goals. Varela spat out a mouthful of dust and muttered, "Perfect. A flaming metal coffin and humiliating hair damage. This is how legends begin." Except no one was around to hear her, unless the universe itself was laughing, which, honestly, it probably was. She was drifting somewhere between defeat and an aggressively bad nap when a figure emerged through the rising smoke, a silhouette too solid, too stupidly upright to be one of her squad mates. Definitely not Shawl. No glowing glyphs, no organic armor, just dark, bulky plating patched with different alloys. Like the man had lost 3 wars and looted the corpses. He didn't walk, he trudged. One hand pressed to his side where red blood leaked steadily. Human. Definitely human. For a half-second, Varela thought she was hallucinating. Then she recognized the shape of his jaw, the lopsided posture, the absurd way he held what looked like a half-broken shield generator as a makeshift deflector. She'd seen sketches of him, heard Barung's stories, the human who had once talked a roach warlord into surrender using nothing but snacks and existential philosophy, the one who disabled a dreadnought with a mining drone and a bucket of neon crabs, the one who always appeared in the worst possible places, did the impossible, and left before anyone could ask if he even had a license. But she never thought she'd actually meet him. He crouched beside her, examined her leg, and made a face. "Oof, that's not supposed to bend that way." "I'm aware," she groaned. "Also, you're bleeding a lot." "Yeah, but it's stylish. Red's in this season." She blinked, dazed. "You're not real," she whispered. "You're a legend." He offered a weak smile. "Yeah, well, legends don't usually limp or smell this bad." He slipped an arm under her shoulders, lifting her with the care of someone who'd done this 100 times and hated it every single one. Her legs screamed. So did she. Probably louder than necessary, but drama seemed fitting. "Let me die here with dignity," she hissed. "No can do," he said. "I've got a quota to fill. Heroic rescues per fiscal quarter, you know?" Despite herself, she chuckled, and then cursed the movement as pain exploded through her ribs. He muttered something about fragile aliens and union rates for battlefield evacuations as he carried her through the broken corridor of twisted steel and shattered bulkheads. Each step he took was accompanied by a grunt, a stumble, or an increasingly creative insult directed at the terrain. At one point, he threatened to sue a rock for intentional assault. The air outside the wreckage was worse. Thalos K's atmosphere was dense with ash and acid-tinted fog. Varela's lungs protested, but the human had something. An old rebreather unit he held up to her mouth. "It's probably sterile," he said. "If not, hey, your lungs get a fun vacation." Somehow it worked. Her breathing eased, though her thoughts did not. Why him? Why now? She'd grown up hearing bedtime tales of the human with no title and no fear who turned war into confusion and chaos into laughter. And yet, here he was, limping, bleeding, rambling about vending machines and real. A sudden crack of energy split the air above them. A patrol drone swept past, sensors growing. The human dropped instantly into cover, dragging her with him into the shadow of a collapsed stanchion. He didn't breathe. Neither did she. When the drone passed, he exhaled and whispered, "Let's keep this between us. Don't want the Legend Committee getting jealous." She tried to keep a straight face. She failed. He grinned at her despite the blood on his lips and grime on his face. "What's your name, anyway?" Varela, Lieutenant. Nice to meet you, Lieutenant Varela. Doesn't matter. Pick something cool. The Phantom is taken, though. You're insane. Only on weekdays. And just like that, the human myth carried her into the ruined horizon of Thalos K, leaving behind smoke, confusion, and a legend she no longer thought was made of dreams. They made it to shelter just as the second sun dipped below Thalos K's corroded ridge, casting long violet shadows through the rusting ribs of an abandoned hydroprocessing station. The structure creaked with the memory of better centuries. Pipes hissed lazily, expelling warm gas into the air, like the planet itself was sighing in exhaustion. Varela collapsed into a corner with as much grace as a bag of malfunctioning servos. Her leg throbbed, her ears twitched involuntarily with every metallic groan around them, and her rescuer, who still refused to give a name, was carefully inspecting a shattered terminal like it might cough up a miracle. "Think that thing still works?" she asked, half hoping he'd say no so they could just rest. "Define works," he said. "If I hit it with my elbow, it might explode. That counts as output, right?" She squinted. "Are all humans this weird, or did I get the deluxe model?" He flashed a lopsided grin. "Oh yeah, you got the factory recall special. Glitches, bugs, and occasional heroism included." A panel sparked behind him, followed by a comically small puff of smoke. He turned deadpan. "See? Told you." Despite the ache crawling up her spine, Varela chuckled, then instantly regretted it. "Stop making me laugh. It hurts in places I didn't know could hurt." "That's just the human experience," he said, setting down his makeshift tool. "Pain and bad decisions, usually, in that order." He walked over and crouched beside her. "Let's look at that leg again." She braced herself, but he was gentle, frustratingly so. His fingers were calloused but precise, as if this wasn't the first alien limb he'd dealt with. "Dislocated," he murmured, tying a strip of his own sleeve around the knee. "Fractured here. You're lucky." "Oh, lucky, am I?" "Yeah, could have been your head, though. With ears like that, maybe you just bounce." She narrowed her eyes. "Careful, these ears can hear sarcasm at 20 kilometers. Then you're hearing music right now." He finished tying the bandage and sat back, exhaling through his teeth. The dim light caught the lines around his eyes. Too deep for someone his age. "You've seen a lot," she said quietly. He didn't look at her. "Seen, dodged, exploded, tripped over. Yeah, war makes a great travel agent. You just don't get to pick the destination." There was a moment of stillness between them, filled only by the rhythmic drip of condensation and the distant rattle of shifting debris. "So," she said at last, "you're not going to tell me your name?" He leaned against a pipe, arms crossed behind his head. "You really want to know?" She nodded. He took a long breath, then said with perfect seriousness, "It's Captain Galactic Pants." She stared. "Middle name, Danger, but only on weekends." "You're the worst," she muttered. "And yet you're still alive. Coincidence?" The laughter came again, uninvited but welcome. Then a low tremor rolled beneath them, rattling loose bolts and raising a fine cloud of dust. He stood instantly, scanning the shadows. That wasn't the planet. That was movement. Varela's eyes darted toward the entrance. More drones. He pulled a device from his belt, a cobbled-together thing that looked part scanner, part toaster, and studied its flickering screen. Something big, 200 meters out. She shifted, pain flaring through her leg. If it's hostile, he said, we'll pretend to be very convincing rocks." She frowned. "Rocks don't talk." "Exactly, so let me do the talking." The steps grew louder. Thud, thud, scrape. Mechanical. Not shawl, not human. He crouched near the door, readying a small pulse grenade that hummed in his palm like a nervous insect. "Tell me when you see anything with more legs than manners." But the creature that stepped into view wasn't monstrous. It was a recon walker, scavenged and modified, its pilot seat occupied by something shaped like a barrel of chewing gum and armor. "Jaxian scavenger," Varela whispered. The human blinked. "Wait, is that a vending unit mounted on its chest?" Indeed it was. The walker froze, as if noticing them at the same time. There was a long pause. The pilot waved one stubby limb. The human lowered his grenade. "I think we're safe, or about to be offered a snack." He He stepped out, raised both hands, and said in perfect Jaxian dialect, "Hey, got any synth choco?" The pilot responded with a warble and ejected a tiny square packet. He caught it midair, turned to Varela, and beamed. "I just negotiated peace with Candy. Still think I'm a myth?" She leaned back, exhausted and amazed. "Number, you're something worse." "What's that?" "A disaster with charm." He unwrapped the candy, handed it to her, and said with a wink, "You're welcome." And for the first time since the war began, she bit into something sweet while the world around her didn't try to kill her, even if it was only for a moment. The Jaxian scavenger trundled off into the dust, its vending unit still chirping quietly as it disappeared between the collapsed columns of the processing station. Varela chewed the last of the synth choco with suspicion. It tasted like victory and furniture polish. She hadn't decided which was stronger.
Massive skeletal remains of mining bots jetted from the rock, some still twitching reflexively as if haunted by old programming. Above the sky churned with silicate storm clouds, and electrical flashes traced slow, lazy arcs across the horizon like celestial scribbles. Walking was not ideal. Varela's leg ached in protest. Her ribs still throbbed with every breath, and the boots she wore, standard Shao military issue, were not made for comfort. She kept moving anyway. So did he. He didn't talk much now. Occasionally, he muttered something under his breath. Complaints, calculations, the occasional jab at their deceased hoversled. But his eyes were always scanning, always tracking the landscape behind them. "Something's following us," he finally said, confirming what her ears had whispered since morning. "I know," she replied. He looked at her, one brow arched. "And you weren't going to mention that because you try to flirt with it," he grinned. "Depends on how many limbs it has." The joke didn't stick. The tension under it was too thick. By midday, the heat radiating off the black stone was unbearable. Varela's skin beneath her armor felt boiled. Her ears twitched, dry and overheated. The human's pace slowed, and she noticed a subtle hitch in his step, a limp he hadn't had yesterday. She stopped. "Sit," she ordered. "I'm fine." "You're limping." "I limp stylishly." "You're bleeding again." He looked down. The side of his shirt was dark with fresh blood. He squinted at it. "Well, that's rude." She dropped to her knees beside him and yanked a med kit from her pack. His face screwed up with mock horror. "Lieutenant, are you trying to seduce me with battlefield first aid?" "Shut up." The bleeding wasn't as bad as it looked, but it was deep. Old wound reopened from movement. She sprayed the synth claw foam, sealed it with a nanopatch, and gave him a look that dared him to make another joke. He wisely remained quiet. "You keep doing this," she muttered as she packed up the kit. "What?" "Charging into danger, getting torn up, smiling like you're doing it for fun." He shrugged. "Maybe I am." She looked at him, really looked, and saw the fatigue buried behind his grin. Not just physical, it was the exhaustion of someone who'd been saving too many people for too long. "You're not a machine," she said. He snorted. "Don't tell the vending units. They still think I'm one of them." They resumed walking, the silence between them warmer now, shared, not heavy. When the relay tower finally came into view, it looked like the fossil of a long-dead god. Its spine-like antenna pierced the sky, blackened by storms, with vines of corroded cabling hanging like webbing. The door at its base was half buried in debris. As they approached, the signal scanner on the human's wrist began to pulse faster. "We're close," he said. "If this still has a live core, I can send a compressed pulse. Might get picked up within a day or two." "A day or two?" she repeated. "You said you had friends." "I do. They're just bad at punctuality." They reached the door, cleared it with effort, and stepped into the echoing interior. The tower's main chamber was filled with inactive hollow panels, shattered equipment, and the skeleton of a technician still slumped over their console. The human offered a quick salute. "Thanks for leaving the lights on, pal." He moved fast now, energized, hands flying, wires twisting, voices muttering. Varela watched the way his fingers knew this alien tech like second nature, like he'd done this 100 times in 100 other places. The power came back with a sudden, dramatic thunk. Lights flickered to life. A panel rose from the central console, glowing with the familiar blue of the Galactic network. "Now," he said, typing quickly. "Just gotta choose the right tone. Something urgent but not panicked, heroic but humble, cool but sincere. Or you could just say, 'Help,'" he grinned. "Where's the flair in that?" Outside, the wind had shifted. A long, low growl echoed over the rocks, closer than before. Varela stiffened. "I think our shadow's still with us." "Good," he said, still typing. "I'm starting to miss it when it's quiet." She moved to the window slit, hand resting on her sidearm. "Maybe it's time you finally told me who you really are." Behind her, he tapped the final key and sent the signal. "I'm the guy who sends out a rescue call and then fights off the monsters while we wait." Outside, something screeched. She sighed. "Of course you are." The screech echoed through the tower's broken ribs, a sound not meant for open sky or breathable air. It vibrated down Varela's spine like static through a miscalibrated nerve implant. She stepped back from the slit window, her sidearm drawn and set to pulse scorch. The weapon hummed softly in her grip, comforting if utterly inadequate. The human didn't flinch. He stood by the console, one hand still resting on the transmission panel, the other tugging a shard of metal from a nearby wrecked drone. His eyes flicked to her, then to the door. "How tall do you think it is?" "Too tall and angry." She listened. Another screech, lower now, closer. She could hear the rhythmic thud-thud of massive limbs crushing stone. "Yes," she said, "definitely angry." He tossed her a spare power cell from his belt. "Back up in case diplomacy doesn't work." "Diplomacy? I have snacks." She almost smiled, but the moment passed fast, as shadow. A flicker of motion outside. The creature, no, the thing moved like a broken concept of biology. 8 limbs, but none of them symmetrical. Armor-plated hide, a head that pulsed with heat signatures like a reactor crammed into a skull. Not native to Thalos K, not from anywhere if her instincts were right. Engineered, hybridized, the kind of thing grown in vats during a war, then forgotten once treaties were signed, and everyone pretended nightmares didn't need cleanup crews. "I have never seen anything like it," she whispered. "Then it's probably from one of the places I've been," he said, stepping up beside her, now armed with a pulse carbine that looked like it had been half chewed by history. The beast reached the tower, sniffing, scanning. It had no visible eyes, but its head swiveled with eerie precision. When it exhaled, the air warped. The door frame rattled. Varela checked the charge on her sidearm. "We can't fight that." "We don't have to win," he said. "Just survive until my friends show up." "Your punctual friends." "They're fashionably late. It's a trend." The beast roared again and lunged, slamming its full weight into the tower's main door. Metal shrieked, panels cracked, dust rained from above as support beams groaned under impact. The human turned to her. "Can you move?" "Define move." "Fast enough to not get eaten." "Barely." "Perfect. We've got a plan." "This feels like a terrible plan." "It's my specialty." He dashed toward the far side of the chamber, kicking open a half-buried maintenance hatch. The tunnel beyond was narrow, dark, and filled with ominous humming sounds. The tower shook again. Another blow from the beast. She followed him in, teeth gritted, pain flaring through her leg as she ducked low and entered the passage. Behind them, the tower's front entrance finally gave. The roar of the creature filled the space like a flood of rage. The tunnel twisted downward into older levels prefabricated during the first colonization phase of Thalos K, long before the wars. The walls were etched with faded warning signs, some in languages neither of them recognized. "I didn't think things could get worse," she muttered. "Welcome to life with me," he said. They reached a junction where the tunnel split. He paused, looked at her, and handed her a flare stick. "Split up?" She hesitated. "It'll be too slow otherwise," he said. "We cover more ground. You loop north to the outer antenna array. I'll head for the cooling core. If this thing is chasing us by scent or heat, maybe I can trick it." She nodded. "And if it doesn't fall for it, then I'll look amazing in the legend." She wanted to argue, but something about the fire in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't a plan of desperation. It was a plan he'd used before and survived. She took the flare, then paused. "What's your name?" He blinked. "I might need something to curse if this goes wrong." He gave a crooked smile. "Tell you when we survive." Then he turned and vanished down the right tunnel. Varela took the left. The air grew colder. Feral systems flickered to life as she passed, some still trying to perform maintenance, others just replaying fragments of long-dead diagnostics. One terminal lit up with a shall greeting protocol before fizzing out again. Above her, the ceiling vibrated. The creature was following. She moved faster, ducking past collapsed pipes and climbing over tangled mesh flooring. Her legs screamed, her lungs burned. Then she reached the antenna relay room. She slapped the flare on the wall, its bright blue glow casting long shadows, and activated the emergency beacon. A light blinked to life. Her heart surged. Behind her, something roared again. She turned, weapon raised. But it wasn't the creature. It was her people. 3 Shao warriors in scout armor, eyes wide, weapons drawn, staring not at her, but past her at the beast crashing down the corridor behind them. And beside them, her grandmother. Varela's jaw dropped. "What are you?" "Later," the old woman said, pushing past her. "Point us to what needs killing." Varela barely had time to process her grandmother's sudden appearance before the tower shook again, louder this time. The beast had found its way into the complex, and it wasn't taking the intrusions lightly. The sound of its claws scraping against metal was like the universe itself was being torn apart. Her grandmother, however, did not seem concerned. If anything, she looked mildly amused. Her Shao armor was old.
Let's give it more reasons to be angry. She raised her weapon, and the air around them hummed with power. The creature's massive form lurched forward, but they were ready. Varela fired again, her shots controlled, calculated, each one finding a vulnerable spot along the creature's hide. It was hard, but not invincible, and just when Varela thought they might have a chance, the human, grinning like he just won a bet, jumped forward with an electrified cable wrapped around his arm, slamming it into the creature's exposed underbelly. Its spasms screeched again, and the ground trembled. Varela gritted her teeth, firing one last shot into its heart. This time, the beast collapsed with a final guttural roar that shook the walls. The creature lay still. Varela exhaled slowly, her breath ragged. Her grandmother nodded as though she'd known all along that they would win this fight. "That wasn't so bad," the human said, brushing his hands off like he'd just handled a minor inconvenience. "Now can we finally talk about that sandwich?" Varela couldn't help but laugh, then winced. "Not now," she muttered. "After we get out of here alive." Her grandmother chuckled as well, her eyes twinkling. "Yes, after. For now, I think we all deserve a little bit of peace. But we're not done yet." "Right," the human said, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Next stop, survival." And with that, they prepared for what came next. The air was thin, cold, and filled with a smell of ozone and dust. The creature's body lay crumpled in a heap at the base of the tower, its mechanical parts twitching weakly in the aftermath of their final assault. Varela stood over it, pulse rifle still in hand, her body aching from the battle, but her mind oddly calm. The weight of survival was heavy, but it felt different now. She had been in countless battles, but this one, this ragtag team of unlikely allies, felt like the first time she was truly fighting for something, not just against the inevitable. The human, covered in grime and sweat, was already moving toward the cooling system, half arguing with the old woman about something he'd rigged, something that might buy them a few more hours. His back was turned, but she could still see the ease in his step now. The way he carried himself, like he wasn't just a myth anymore. He was real, imperfect, flawed, but so very real. Her grandmother, meanwhile, had moved to the control center and was already tapping at the console, pulling up a long-range comm signal. The dust had settled, and the air in the room no longer felt like it was about to suffocate them. The beast was dead, the immediate danger past, but there were still questions to answer. "You called for backup?" Varela asked, her voice rough. "Of course I did." Her grandmother didn't look up from the console. "You think I'm out here for fun?" "Well, you did just rescue us with a ridiculous amount of style," the human said, tossing a tool across the room and smirking at Varela. I think I can at least try to match that level of ridiculousness. She smirked in return, despite herself. You're impossible. True, but I'm also alive, and that's something worth celebrating. Varela couldn't help but laugh, the tension finally cracking. Her grandmother shot them both a sideways glance, but didn't comment. Instead, she turned to the console again, a series of numbers scrolling quickly across the screen. Signals out, her grandmother said, her voice softer now, more reflective. We'll get some help soon enough, but not enough to change things. What do you mean? Varela asked, stepping closer. The weight of the moment pressed in, and she couldn't tell if it was the exhaustion or something else that made the words heavier. Her grandmother turned, meeting her gaze. The war is still out there. It doesn't stop because you kill one monster or make one ally. It's bigger than that. But you've learned something valuable, something more valuable than anything I could have taught you in a lifetime. Varela frowned. And what's that? Hope, her grandmother said simply. You've seen it in the most unexpected places, and you found it where no one else bothered to look. That's how we keep going. Varela took a long breath, her mind working through the truth of her grandmother's words. It wasn't just the adrenaline of the battle, it wasn't the thrill of victory. It was the people around her, their resilience. The human who had been nothing but a rumor to her, a name in stories, was now standing beside her, alive, still fighting. Guess that's the lesson, the human said, as though he had read her thoughts, a small grin tugging at the corner of his lips. Hope isn't just for the legends, it's for real people, too. She looked at him, really looked this time, no longer a myth, no longer a stranger. He was just like her, trying, struggling, but somehow managing to survive. And in that moment, the walls of their world felt a little less suffocating. A series of beeps broke the silence, and her grandmother looked down at the console again, her fingers tapping rapidly. Well, well, it seems like our friends have finally decided to show up. Varela took a moment to adjust, to breathe. Who are they? Her grandmother turned, a sly smile curling at the edges of her lips. People who owe me a few favors. The human groaned. What is it with you, Shaw, and your weird networks of friends? I can't keep up. They're not friends, Varela's grandmother said with a smirk. They're just people who don't want to see us get blown up again. Her grandmother's words were a final pointed jab at the tense quiet of the last few days. But as the console flared to life and the signal cleared, it became clear they weren't out of danger yet, but they weren't alone either. Varela stepped forward, finally letting the weight of it all settle. She felt stronger, more grounded in a way she hadn't been before. Whatever came next, whether it was the beginning of a new war or the last remnants of one they couldn't outrun, she was ready for it, and she was no longer fighting alone. The human slapped her lightly on the back, grinning widely. Now that we're officially out of imminent death, want to grab a drink? Or maybe, figure out how we're going to stay alive until the end of this disaster? Varela smirked, feeling a warmth settle in her chest. Maybe after I find a medic. I'm pretty sure my leg is going to file a lawsuit soon. Fair, the human said with a grin. But hey, at least we'll have a good story to tell, right? And for the first time since the battle had started, Varela realized he was right. Whatever came next, they would face it together. She wasn't alone, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the unknown. The signal flashed again, and outside, the first signs of their rescue arrived, cutting through the twilight sky. For now, at least, they were safe.